Hey, we are live. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Survivor Rights. We have a huge show tonight. We are on with 2x2 accountability. So, we are going to be talking a lot about a lot of things. So I'm going to just give a quick minute for people to start hopping on. Let's go ahead and get started. I don't want to go over too much on time today. I like to keep these right at an hour. So again, we are unbroken, stay informed. Specific to the 2x2 Church, very, very powerful show today. So we are going to cover the legal statutes. Cynthia's got a lot to do with that. A little bit about the FBI investigation, the risk factors of perpetrators. We're going to go over that a lot, which is incredible information from you, Denise. We're going to talk a little bit about the red boxes. So I want to start by introducing our guest today. Cynthia Liles needs almost no introduction. She is the woman, the private investigator, the legend, the myth, all of the above. And but not everybody might know Denise Doucette. So I do want to just tell a little bit about the background and the expertise with which she is coming at this conversation. She is part of the 2x2 accountability team. Denise spent approximately half of her 39-year career working in county jails and the state prison systems of Iowa and California. While in California, she held certifications in sex addictions and sex offender treatment. During that time, she provided treatment through an outpatient clinic, and eventually she became a probation officer in the state of California. As a correctional counselor in Iowa, she facilitated intensive group therapy with convicted sex offenders, and her work experience includes collaboration with a polygraph examiner and evaluating risk assessment criteria. So her work with sex offenders is extensive, decades of work. So as we get into this, I just want to make sure everybody is clear that we are coming at this from a very informed approach. I wanted to start tonight with a little bit about the background that got us to today, because not everybody watching this show might know all that. So let's just start. The 2x2 Church has been going for a long, long time, and we had an incident in March of 2023. We call it Brewergate, where one of our overseer workers was found dead in a hotel room doing unmentionable things. And really, as Natalie mentioned on our show last week, it's pretty much been a fire hose ever since then. And so what I'm going to talk about now is AFTT formed, which was Advocates for Advocates to Tell the Truth. CCF formed, which was Caring and Concerned Friends. Many people have given countless hours in the organization, in the church, to try to affect change through those two organizations. When that didn't happen, there's what we refer to as the Great Falling Away. CCF continues to go on. Bridging the Gap was formed by Galen and Rhonda Grillo. I also do want to acknowledge the professional training that some ministry in the 2x2 Church did opt in for. So when they had the opportunity to do that, I do want to give credit to Minnesota and Iowa, Washington, Alaska, Idaho, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, and North and South Dakota. In those cases, Denise, who's with us tonight, sent a very clear message on how to manage sex offenders. Even though she gave those presentations, we do want to acknowledge that it has pretty much been ignored ever since, and across the board in the world, the knowledge and information. So I just want to say that they have been given this knowledge and information, and they are choosing to ignore it. With that, with the fire hose and so much going on, AFTT then broke into some partner nonprofits. So what is in existence today is now 2x2 Accountability, which is a 501c3 focused very specifically on the investigations and accountability to the church. That's who we have on tonight. Next week, we will have Bridges and Balm with Steve Padden. That's another 501c3. That organization specifically facilitates the funding for therapy for survivors, as well as ministry that is no longer in the ministry and is trying to survive on the outside. And that's going to be a whole nother story that we're going to talk about later. And then also Dr. Natalie Boland, who was on with us last week, formed Pathways to Healing, which also is another huge organization helping in the healing process of all of this in all kinds of abuse, not just sex abuse. So we're going to be talking a lot about sex abuse tonight, but in general, there's a lot of abuse that we'll eventually get to. It's just going to take a while. I also want to acknowledge where we are now. I want to start by saying kids are not safe, even with all of the advocacy that has been done on so many people's part. Workers are still staying in homes. Predators are still in meeting and going to church, going to convention. In every place, there is zero safety protocols in place that are truly happening. So kids are still not being... There's also a lot of guilt and anger still in play for a lot of reasons and in a lot of ways and for a lot of people. I want to start by saying generations before us that did not keep us safe. There is still a lot of anger and frustration around that. Primarily in that the fact the system was more important than children, and that is what's still happening today. And those wounds are very, very, very deep for a lot of people. So that's where I just want to kind of stop there, and then we're going to open it up. Cynthia, you're going to start. So much information that's going to get covered tonight. We're going to move through it really quickly. So if anybody has questions, I'll try to keep us online so we can stay within our time period. But we will take questions at the very end. Hopefully we will have time to do that. But we're going to be also referencing a few pieces of information that if I can't get them posted into comments while we're online here, I'll be posting them as soon as the show is over, and they'll be in there, and they'll also be posted to YouTube. So this entire thing will be on YouTube tomorrow as well. So let's start with you, Cynthia Liles, and I want to start by just talking about tolling statutes, also known as statute of limitations. Tell us a little bit about what that means.
Yes, so tolling statutes. So what's so interesting about tolling statutes is I think every state has them. They're just not utilized very often. And a lot of times the detectives or whoever's interviewing a survivor, they may not even realize that these statutes can be in play. They don't really love working on historical sex abuse cases. So, because they're working on current situations. But so survivors really have to advocate for themselves. And unfortunately, that's just the way it is. You got to be the squeaky wheel. And so I encourage survivors to learn about these things and advocate. We will help you we're here to help you advocate, which we have done for many survivors and with the DA's office. And please take a look at these statutes. So I want to give you an example of a tolling statute. So I have Montana's. You don't look these up on the internet. These are you go to you can't really see it, but you go to the law library or call them. They'll help you pull these. So these are the revised codes of Montana from 1969. And so the statutes in 1969, so say you were abused in 1971 by a worker in Montana. The statutes then were prosecution for murder could be commenced at any time. Okay? Limitation of 5 years in all other felonies. So everything else was 5 years. Then we get to the tolling statute. Exception when defendant is out of state. So this applies to workers who moved. And like I said, I think every state has these. If after the offense is committed, the defendant leaves the state or resides outside the state, the indictment may be found or an information or complaint filed within the time herein limited after his coming within the state, and no time during which the defendant is not an inhabitant or actually a resident within the state is part of the limitation. So that means these guys can be extradited back to the state and arrested. So 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 this goes into effect in 1969. Say you're abused by a worker in 1971. He gets moved to another state. You still have years left on the window. Okay? Right. So as long as they don't live in the state again, that statute, it's like the clock stops. The clock stops when they leave the state. And when they come back to reside in the state, the clock starts again.
Love that.
Okay? So this can be used. I've worked on a case where this was used, actually. So in a different jurisdiction. So those are tolling statutes. And they absolutely could be used for some workers that were moved around.
That is awesome information.
So want to let people know about that.
Okay, so talk about statute of limitations for a minute. So
Well, statute of limitations are just really complicated. They're different in every state. They're very complicated in some states, in all states really. But there's criminal statute of limitations and there's civil statute of limitations. Two totally different things. I mostly wanted to talk about civil statute of limitations this evening. Criminal ones, of course, are if you go and report to law enforcement, and it's really best if you report. You can inform them about the tolling statutes if you think your case would apply there, but they got to figure out the math of which statutes would apply for the offense that took place and all that kind of thing. So, but as far as the statute of limitations for civil claims, many states, okay, so California has an open window right now, started on January 1st, ends on December 31st, 2027. This is for survivors of adult sex assault. That is what the statute is open for. It's called the look back window. So if you were 18 or over and you suffered any kind of sex assault, you have until December 31st of 2027 to sue either the perpetrator or an institution, an entity. Okay? So if anybody was abused as 18 or older by anybody in the church, you have an opportunity to sue the perpetrator or take a run at the church.
in the state of California.
In the state of California, which I think, back when we were working on Sherry's case, and so far, I mean, I've talked to some other lawyers in the past few years. Nobody's bit yet, but we know so much more now about the money. So it's going to happen. There will be a case eventually. But if your perpetrator has assets, you can sue them. You can sue them. Okay? And then there's lots of other states that have windows open, or they're working on passing legislation for these look back windows. I believe Alabama has an open right now. Oh, actually, Louisiana has an open one right now. I'm 99% sure. That one closes on June 14th of 2027 for child sex abuse.
Wow.
Okay? So if you were abused in Louisiana, you have until June 14th of 2027 to either sue your perpetrator or take a run at the church. Okay? So that's kind of what I wanted to cover on statute of limitations. Every states are different. Some of them are super complicated, and it's always worth checking if you're thinking about suing, because some of them are 20 years after you turn 18 or up until you're age 55. I think Alabama's, I think, is now you can sue up until the time you're 55 years old. So lots of people are going to fall under that.
What about Oregon?
Oregon's are really complicated. Don't even want to talk about those. But I can put anybody in touch with an attorney who can walk them through this across the United States and in some other countries. I think there are 4 states, I think Maryland, maybe Vermont, Guam, and the Mariana Islands. Open statute of limitations, retroactive, all the way back. It's not a window. It's permanently open if you were abused in any of those places. Guam, anybody from Guam, we had perpetrator workers in those areas, right? So
So I
Yeah.
just want to acknowledge that a lot of people have had a lot of questions and also a lot of frustration around not understanding how statute of limitations work and why we're not able to get convictions or bring people to justice. And so I just wanted to clarify for people that the statute of limitations is super complicated and they do run out. And so many of these cases are older. And so that is a huge factor, but I just do want to help make sure that people understand if they can sue, they certainly should, and so they should reach out to you, Cynthia.
Yeah, because I just believe it's worth talking to a lawyer, and if there's a path forward. Now, what's really frustrating to me is none of that would have to happen if the workers would do the right thing and open the coffers and start paying out money to survivors, because that's
Yes,
what should happen. That's what I want to
absolutely.
happen. So
Right,
none of this has to happen. You don't have to worry about the statute of limitations if the workers would do the right thing.
right. Okay, so what do you say to people who feel like that you're just out for money? Because I've had that comment made to me several times.
It's the only tool. I
Right,
mean, that's the only tool we have for justice.
right. And it's not something that's specific that we're looking at just in this specific situation. It is the tool that the entire world uses for justice.
It's the tool.
The
It's the
tool.
tool. You think
Yep.
that the child that was abused would rather have $250,000 or their innocence back?
Right.
There's no price tag on it. It's not about the money.
Right.
It's really not about the money. But
Yes.
it's the only tool there is.
Yep.
And they've got the money. Do the right thing. Make people, we call it make people whole. You can't make it all better, but
Right. And the reason that they haven't done that, just so that people are aware that once they do one, then it's just going to start a precedent. And so they have been advised by their legal team to not do that in a
well,
lot of
they've done
cases.
them in the past very quietly.
Right.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
they've done a lot of things very
yeah,
quietly for a very long
yeah.
time.
So,
Okay. Any questions specifically on that for anybody? Hold those questions to the very end, but go ahead and write them. We're going to keep moving forward. Talk to us about the Protect Act, Cynthia.
what's that?
The Protect Act.
The Protect Act is a federal law that was passed in 2003. So anybody, okay, so it allows for a lot of things around trafficking and child porn and all sorts of things. But one component of the Protect Act is that U.S. citizens who abuse children abroad in foreign countries can be prosecuted for those crimes. So these would apply to any crimes that happened after 2003. So this also, workers have traveled all over the world. So any U.S. citizen, worker, or one of the friends, whoever, that abused a child in a foreign country, they can be prosecuted under the Protect Act. And other countries have those laws on their books as well. I know Ireland does. There's lots of other countries that have those where they can prosecute their citizens for abusing children in foreign countries. So I know that one applies to several cases. There again, law enforcement is not always aware about the laws on the books. So it's good to educate yourself around the available laws, the available remedies.
And talk to a lawyer, like you
Yep.
said.
Yep.
So thank you, Beverly. Beverly's posting that. We will be posting a link to that as well. I posted it earlier in the comments so that people could access that prior
Great.
to this in case they had any questions about it. But so again, seeking legal advice is so important. Reaching out to you, you can make that connection for people if they want to do that. While we're still on you, before we move over to Denise for a minute, talk to us for a second about how important it is that people report still.
Well, I mean, it's really up to the survivor. It, yeah, I mean, I would encourage anybody who knows children are in danger. I mean, if their perpetrator still has access to children, I think it's really important to report, but it's so different for every survivor.
We'll talk about that a little more when we get to the red boxes at the
Yeah,
end.
but one thing I was going to say about, consulting with legal counsel about any of these statute of limitations, whether you're thinking about civil or criminal, is at least if you've taken all those steps, I think for a survivor, that you've unturned every stone, right? I looked at everything that was out there that was possible. I know I took all the steps I could have taken, and there's just no path forward for me. And so, check that
Right.
off the list.
So, as we move into you, Denise, I want to talk for a second about 2x2 accountability as an organization and what you guys are doing, and how Denise, if you could maybe talk, Denise, how you fit into continuing. Like, I just want the world to know that you are not stopping and you are not backing down and you are not letting up on educating people about how perps behave, why they do what they do, what the risk factors are, which we're going to get into that now. But I just, as an organization, you're still actively having these conversations and doing everything you can to move that forward. So I really just want to make that point as we move into this.
And can I first say, how lucky am I to have Denise on my team?
She
Yes,
is incredible. Oh my goodness,
yes,
you guys.
yes.
Okay, just a warning for all of you out there that what's coming at you right now is information that it's sensitive, but she is a powerhouse.
She is.
Denise, the floor is you. Talk to us for a second. Let's start with perps don't age out. They don't stop offending because they're old. Start there.
Okay. I'd like to say welcome everybody and thank you for being willing to listen to this presentation. First of all, there's something called secondary trauma and or vicarious trauma. And what that means is that a person can be traumatized from even hearing about specific events that have happened to another person. So I will be very careful tonight with the information that I present, and I will not go into a lot of specific case details, but more I will talk about the overall impact of the behaviors that perpetrators have. So I'd just like to make that clear that if any survivors are listening tonight, which I'm guessing there probably are, that I will do my best not to have anything that I talk about be dramatically traumatizing. And I think that's a really important point to make from a therapeutic perspective. So with that said, Crystal, refresh my memory real quick. What did you ask me that you wanted me to touch on?
They don't stop perping out because they're old.
Yes. Okay, so that is kind of a misconception that the public has. And the bottom line is that I have had perpetrators on my caseload who are in their 70s or their 80s or even sometimes their early 90s. And we all know that physiologically, as a man ages, he may not be able to perform sexual acts the way that he did when he was a younger man. That does not stop certain perpetrators from still having the desire and the attraction to perpetrate upon the victims that they like to perpetrate upon. With that said, there are other ways that they can still perpetrate upon the victim without necessarily being able to perform the sexual act themselves. So it is a myth that a perpetrator basically ages out and or loses the desire to still have those sexual behaviors. So I'd really like to underscore that because I don't want anybody believing otherwise. So with that said, one of the things I'd really like to touch upon is that I think it's already been made clear currently and historically that the 2x2 church has tried to sweep all of these things under the rug. And at times they may have tried to address the issues, but certainly not directly, and certainly not by holding the perpetrator accountable. And with what Cynthia was talking about earlier, to the degree that a survivor is willing to come forward, and it's certainly understandable if they're not willing yet, but to the degree that they can be willing to come forward, that's really the only hope that maybe a perpetrator could even change. It's because the accountability gets his attention. And so if nothing else, dynamically, the church again has done a huge disservice to anybody who has been perpetrated upon by either members of the ministry or members of the fellowship. It's a huge disservice to again not hold the perpetrator directly accountable through legal means, because the perpetrator just has the green light to continue with their behaviors. Even perpetrators who are convicted and who go to prison often are still not willing to become repentant and or be willing to work on their own personal issues of what brought them there to begin with. But that's really the only hope, is that basically public accountability is something that gets their attention, and that it also gets them the services that they could utilize. So if nothing more, the church has made egregious errors for years by not holding these people accountable. And my main guess is that the reason why the church hasn't is because, number one, they're wanting to save face, and number two, they're not wanting to lose their financial backing and or their financial coffers they don't want it tapped into. And Cynthia's already really touched upon that. So one of the things that I would like to address at this juncture is that I've heard it said from time to time, and I've not known of a case directly, so I need to say that, but I've heard it said from time to time that sometimes the decision that the ministry has made historically, when they know that there's a perpetrator amongst them, especially within the fellowship itself, is that they decided to have the perpetrator be escorted to a meeting, whether it's a Sunday morning worship meeting or whether it's a gospel meeting or maybe even convention, but they decided to have the perpetrator escorted by another individual who understands some of the history of the perpetrator, in the hopes that then the perpetrator will not act out upon any victims going forward. Well, I would like to let the public know that that's not effective. You could have a well-meaning person escort the perpetrator to the meeting and stay attached at the hip, so to speak, with that perpetrator during the meeting, and then escort the perpetrator immediately out of the meeting in the hopes that then they're not literally putting their hands on somebody else. But that's not effective, because anytime a perpetrator goes to an event like a Sunday morning meeting or a gospel meeting, and they're amongst other people in the meeting that represent people within the population that they're perpetrating upon, they're triggered. So the example that I'd like to give is, say, a Sunday morning worship meeting, a perpetrator is escorted with somebody to go to that meeting, and the perpetrator's primary victims of choice is small children, small female children, we'll say. Well, in the meeting, there's often children. And so if a little girl is sitting on a chair next to her mother, and the little girl is 2 years old, and she's still going through the potty training phase, and the little girl gets a little antsy in her chair, as children often do, and she's wiggling around a little bit in her chair, and her dress rises up, and it flashes her diaper, or it flashes her underwear, momentarily. And the mom reaches down and smooths her dress back down and has her sit back up. Well, for everybody else in the meeting who isn't a sexual deviant, they're not even going to be paying attention probably to the fact that the little girl was squirming around a little bit, because they're focusing on what's happening in the meeting. But for the perpetrator, it gets his attention to be able to start having triggered ideas in his head by seeing that happening. And what happens is it triggers deviant sexual fantasies. And the handout that I'm speaking about, I did provide it, and it is in the notes. Hopefully,
Yes.
there we go. That's what I'm talking about, is this handout right here. This triggers deviant sexual fantasies for the perpetrator. And perpetrators, when I say deviant sexual fantasies, those fantasies are different than the average fantasies that non-perpetrating people have. So if it triggers deviant sexual fantasies for him, then that starts to build urges for him. So now the meeting's over, and that perpetrator leaves with his escort, but it's started to build some urges up inside of him. And the urges continue to grow, and the urges can be reinforced. And eventually, if this perpetrator hasn't gotten interventions, whether they be criminal justice interventions, meaning going through the criminal justice system and or being in prison or jail, and if this perpetrator is not repentant and wanting to work on his own issues, then eventually these deviant sexual fantasies and urges build up till he's going to act out again and have another victim. So the whole concept of having a person escort you to a meeting is dysfunctional in the real world. It just is not effective, period.
And I would
Were you
like to
gonna
make
say
the
something?
point, right? I just
Okay.
want to make a point right there that it is lack of understanding and information and knowledge about this subject, they are naive enough. I don't know. I battle with this because do they honest? They keep saying that the perps need to continue coming to meeting because for their salvation and for their, do they really honestly believe that that person is sitting there and listening to the meeting and focusing on God? No, that's what they don't understand.
Okay. Okay, and so my answer to that is after Brewergate broke, which has already been identified in this presentation by you earlier, my initial reaction, other than some shock and some disgust and being very upset about it, because I figured it was the tip of the iceberg. So after Brewergate broke, my initial reaction was I wanted to be supportive of the ministry and kind of try to drag them out of the dark ages in terms of providing professional information about how to deal with members of this population. And so once I had wrapped my head around that concept for myself, it really occurred to me exactly what you just said, that the ministry would probably be adverse to just cutting these people out of meeting to get all together. And I recognize that. And so often you need to be able to provide a prescription and or provide a solution that'll be workable within the reality of the situation. And the reality is that, yes, I agree with you, the ministry was not going to be willing just to cast these people out, so to speak. So there was going to be a overseers meeting in 2024 that was going to be happening in, I believe it was the state of Wisconsin. It was one of the Midwest states, and I believe it was Wisconsin, but if I'm mistaken about where it happened, please forgive me. Anyway, so that's when I developed this handout about how urges work for a perpetrator, and I specifically asked a worker from the Minnesota-Iowa field who was going to be attending that meeting to hand carry this handout to those overseers and explain it to them, that this is what needed to happen in terms of how to deal with members of the targeted perpetrator population. And so I developed a prescription also that I tried to introduce to them in the trainings that we were part of, the trainings in those states that you mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. And the prescription is that anybody who was either identified definitely as having a history of perpetration and or anybody that had credible allegations made against them, that they needed to be part of something that I would term a closed meeting. And the closed meeting concept comes from the substance abuse world, where people who have a problem, specifically as drug addicts or alcoholics, they can go to a closed meeting and be just amongst other drug addicts and alcoholics, where they can really be able to partake of the meeting and have information and work on the recovery process amongst themselves. So I wrote basically a prescription for the overseers and for those that are in leadership in the ministry, that they would need to develop closed meetings throughout the world for anybody with allegations and or who is already an identified perpetrator, that person could only go to Sunday morning worship meetings in a closed home where the elder and or his partner, his wife, knew the history of the individual specifically, and nobody else would be part of that meeting that was a member of their identified victim population. In other words, if they were people who would meet the criteria for having sexually abused children, there would be no children in that meeting, absolutely no minors in that meeting. If they were a person who that had a background with assaulting adults, then they would have no women in that meeting. Maybe only the adult male elder would meet with them. But the whole bottom line would be is that, number one, we want to provide a Sunday morning meeting that would be trigger free for them. Because the bottom line is, and the question I'd like to ask the ministry is, if you care about the perpetrators the way that you allegedly state that you do, why would you want to put this person in a meeting where they're going to be triggered, where they're going to be tempted? Why would you want to put them in a position of temptation?
Gail Craig already said exactly what you did in the comments of this. She said they're not protecting the perps either.
No.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
Exactly.
Denise, and how crazy is it? I don't know if you saw in a chat that we're in, I think last week. Oh no, I posted it on Facebook. Jeff, I think it was Jeff Thayer, wrote an email to a survivor before Brewergate about how they had been trained by a law firm, by a lawyer. They had been trained on child sex abuse and they were doing
Yes.
ministry safe. That was back in like 2021. So
Yeah.
it's wild to me that you're coming on scene in 2023. They've already learned all this. We thought they
Yes.
were naive. They already knew.
Yes. Yes. And I had made some comments. I had commented on that Jeff Thayer post. And
Uh-huh.
also, I am familiar with Jeff Thayer. I never met him before personally, face to face, but he is a person. When I became aware of a case in Minnesota at the time that he was still the overseer, I went to some lengths to address the situation up there and to address him in terms of his decision making with it. And I tried to force the issue at that point to have a certain known predator not be in meetings with children anymore. And I tried to deal with Mr. Thayer to get him to make that decision. So I am a little bit familiar with that history. With that
Yeah.
situation.
So
So,
they have the knowledge. They have the knowledge. They just
Are choosing
Yes.
that.
but because they choose not to, anybody watching this can still learn from Denise and make
Yes.
their own decisions.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So with that said, I want to talk next a couple of things that got posted this week. One was about Uncle Charlie, the child being put the responsibility put onto the child to protect themselves. Like,
exactly, exactly. That is number one. Again, what people have tried to do historically, not just within the 2x2 church, but just within the general public, is that often, especially if there was a known perpetrator within a family circle or family structure, that yes, telling the children, try to stay away from Uncle Charlie if he comes to visit, or don't be alone with him. Well, it's a huge farce is what it is, because number one, you're absolutely right. That's putting the responsibility on a child.
Right.
And so then if something inappropriate does occur with Uncle Charlie, that just builds the shame and the guilt and the sense of failure further for the child. It is the adult caretaker's responsibility in that child's life to do effective boundary setting with old Uncle Charlie.
absolutely.
Never in a million years would I have said to my children when they were minors, watch out for your Uncle Charlie. No, Uncle Charlie wouldn't be stepping a foot in my household, and Uncle Charlie probably wouldn't want to, because certainly I'm all about accountability, because it's the functional thing to do not only for the victim, but it's the functional thing to do for the perpetrator. So
Yeah.
yeah, I just thought to myself when I read that, I just thought, oh boy. So again, the adult caretakers in the children's lives are the ones that need to step up and do the appropriate boundary setting and do the appropriate accountability for any person who offers a threat in that manner.
I
let
love
alone
that.
the ministry.
With that, I want to make a point about the other comment that the three of us were discussing, and that is not picking a side is picking a side. That statement was also made on one of the Facebook groups. If you choose to just say, "Oh, I'm just going to stay out of this," you're picking a side.
Yes,
So just
absolutely.
to be very, very clear.
Silence or not addressing it is picking the way to handle it. That's absolutely right. And it's called
Right.
complicit.
Right.
And at this stage of the game, since Brewergate broke, so to speak, I would hope that the majority of people, number one, especially in the United States anyway, are aware of what's occurring with this church, or this cult, so to speak, because that's what I've come to the conclusion it truly is. But that's, of course, another topic. But yes, if you're not willing to do the healthy boundary setting, and if you're not willing to advocate for the safety of children and or for the safety of adult people who could be victimized, then you are being complicit at this stage, because there's certainly enough information out there. This is 2026. And the other
Right.
the other caveat is in 21 states of America, members of the ministry are mandated reporters.
Yes.
And for those who might be listening to this audience who don't know what a mandated reporter is, I've been a mandated reporter for the 40 years plus years of my career, meaning that if you're providing treatment as a social worker or as a psychologist or as a marriage, family, child counselor, you are mandated, just like school teachers are and just like medical staff are, to report if you become aware of any type of sexual or physical or neglectful behaviors towards children. In 27 states in America, so the majority, in the ministry, you're a mandated reporter. So not only if they've had poor judgment and sweeping it under the rug for their own motivations, they've been thinking that they're above the law or that they don't have to follow the laws of the land that we're living in.
Right.
And so again, that's another huge factor that has been very neglected over the years.
Yes. So with that, let's talk for just a second. Obviously, we have clarified zero tolerance versus full access. I don't think there's anything in between. It's one or the other, and they have chosen full access. What would zero tolerance look like? Zero tolerance. Seems obvious.
For me, zero tolerance means that basically, like a lot of churches do now anyway, is they just don't allow a known perpetrator to partake or be part of the church. So that's what really truly zero tolerance would mean for me. But again, knowing the ministry the way that I do with the 2x2 church, I knew that that was not going to be something that they would be willing to embrace or willing to accept. And so that's why the idea of closed meetings and only Sunday morning meetings for the perpetrators, because then that way it would be protection for anybody who's already been victimized and or to be re-traumatized if you have that history. It'd also be protection for not making future victims, and then also it's accountability for the perpetrator, at least to some degree. So that's why the prescription was written that way, and that would have been the cleanest way to handle it if in fact they weren't willing to foster or adopt a zero tolerance policy.
Cynthia, how many perpetrators are currently on your books?
Oh,
2x2 church.
I could look. I think we're at like 1,160 some, I think. Let me look. But the problem, Denise, I wouldn't say we disagree, but the issue with the closed meetings in the 2x2 system, it's such a familial system. And these are masterful groomers, right? So, and that masterful groomer is either related to somebody or, yeah, because everybody's connected, right? So you might have a closed meeting, but then after a while, those boundaries come down. I mean, everybody has to be diligent.
Right.
So zero tolerance means educating. Part of that is educating everyone and getting everybody to sign on to protecting both the perpetrator, this is for their protection too, and survivors or future survivors.
Right.
I'll give
Denise,
you
can you
separate.
talk one quick second about ministry safe, and do you feel that is adequate enough for the ones who are actually doing that?
No, I think it's just a beginning. It's just a beginning situation. I think that they need a lot more education than Ministry Safe. But the bottom line is they weren't even willing to implement the things they learned within Ministry Safe. No. So again, whether it was an effective tool or not, they weren't willing to incorporate it consistently. So, and I'd like to go back to what Cynthia said. Absolutely, it's a multi-generational family type of church. And so there was that prescription, that was the beginning of the prescription. There was other steps that were also created that, again, the ministry, if they didn't want to take the responsibility for the accountability for the perpetrator. The prescription over time, as we went past the tip of the iceberg and found more of what we were really facing, there was talk about creating safety teams within the fields, the various fields, and that anybody who had credible allegations and or who had been through the criminal justice system and been convicted, there were other things that they would be held accountable to do, that they'd only be able to be in a Sunday morning closed meeting in the beginning, but they'd also have to go for sex offender treatment and therapy, because the other caveat that we faced within this church is that the vast majority of perpetrators for generations were never held accountable to begin with. And
Right.
so with that caveat, there was no interventions done.
Right.
And so we wanted to hold
Someone's
them
asked.
accountable
Go ahead.
by having them get treatment for the accountability piece, because there was no criminal justice accountability piece with the majority of these people. So the
Right.
prescription was even detailed out further for the North Carolina, Maryland, Fields, that area, region, I should say. And again, it was rejected. So there was more tools put in place that could have been implemented, and they chose not to.
So somebody's asking a question about victims feeling re-traumatized when they're learning of perps being allowed in meetings. Is that, yes, that's a trigger, a re-trigger for any.
It's very legitimate for survivors to be re-traumatized, definitely,
Yes.
whether it's their perpetrator or somebody else's perpetrator.
Absolutely. Okay, so for the sake of time, I want to come back to grooming, but I want to move on really quickly to the FBI investigation status for just a second.
Oh, that's a short answer. It's still active.
Love it.
Yep.
And just want to clarify, still active.
Still active.
Yes. Red boxes. So many questions around this. If
Okay.
a person is deceased, if somebody is deceased, why is it still so important to disclose those and put them out there?
I'll let Denise answer that one, if you don't mind.
No, I don't mind at all, because number one, when it's made public in the red box, there's more victims who could come forward. So it gives legitimacy to the victim, whether the perpetrator's dead or not. It gives legitimacy to the victim that, hey, somebody is making this public, and so that's a form of accountability. And then the victim might feel more safe, especially knowing now that the person's dead, because maybe they didn't even know the person died yet, that maybe they could come forward as well. So it's a very functional tool, and it's something that we should continue to do.
Absolutely agree. I just get that question a lot, so I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
Cynthia, could you just speak very quickly to the investigative process that you have gone through before you release one of those? I want people to be very clear that before a red box comes out, you're not just putting somebody's name out there because somebody called in and said,
Yeah.
this happened.
Yeah. So some of them I don't consult anybody else on my team. I've got Denise, Todd Price, and Deb Rhodes. They're both retired FBI agents who've worked on child sex abuse cases. So an amazing team of people. And we have our attorney who also weighs in on things sometimes. So some of them are no-brainers. I do them all by myself. And that's because I have so much documentation and corroboration that it just goes up, because either I've got documentation, we have an admission, we have a conviction, or they have multiple allegations and these survivors don't even know each other. So, but then there's other ones where I consult with the team and everybody weighs in. And we look at all the evidence, we say, talk about, can you go get this? Can you go get that? Can we talk to these people? So before we put a name out, we've what I call papered the file, where we've got the documentation, where we have enough that we are not concerned about putting the information out there. And we think it's the prudent thing to do.
I also want to be very clear, because I don't know that everyone in the world knows, Cynthia, that you are a private investigator, have been for years and years and years, and that your specialty is sex abuse cases in all areas. So yes, you do the 2x2 church, but you also have been very active in the Boy Scouts, the Epstein files, lots and lots of corporate things. So this is not a 2x2 witch hunt on your behalf.
No.
I want to make sure that the whole
Yeah.
world is very clear
Yeah.
that you are a sex abuse private investigator. That is your specialty and has been for decades.
It's not for decades, but it is what I do.
It's a long, long time.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that, my next question about the red boxes is, why don't people defend themselves when they come out?
Well, I mean, if as in, I didn't do this, and
Yes.
you'd have to actually file a lawsuit if you want to defend yourself. Some do defend themselves to us. I've heard from perpetrators or their family, and we have what we have. And if they want to open that discovery process, we welcome it. I mean, the fact is, we're putting out there that we are confident in these allegations. We're not making up that
Right.
this person has an allegation. And
Yeah.
yeah.
That's part of the goal of this whole show, is that people become informed and aware of your process, your background, how this whole thing works, what they can expect moving forward, and why it happens the way it does. Because I think a lot of people, it's like, oh, they just see a red box come out, but they don't really realize what goes into it or what you have done and the whole team that's behind that, and how sure you are of those allegations before that red box is
Oh,
released.
yeah. I mean, some of them we've spent days,
Yeah.
hours and hours and hours and hours on the work behind the red box going up.
Right.
So, and it's crazy, like what Denise was talking about. I mean, there were some red box, I put up a bunch a couple weeks ago where so many more survivors came forward that were perpetrated by those perpetrators. So, and I mean, yeah, they thought they were the only one.
That's the thing.
So it's a good thing for healing for survivors, because they know they're not the only one. Some of them want to be in touch with other survivors. So it's a healing thing that we can do for survivors.
I love that. Denise, let's talk for a little bit about grooming.
Okay. Well, first of all, we all know that the workers stay in the homes. And so that is immediate access to anybody in the home. And I have another handout that we put in the comment sections, and it talks about the common characteristics of diagnosable pedophiles. So right now I'm talking a pedophile. I'm not talking necessarily somebody who sexually assaults adults. Pedophiles are notoriously friendly, they're nice, they're kind, they're usually very engageable, they're engaging, they're very likable, and sometimes they're even a bit immature for their chronological age, so they really seem to hit it off with the children in the home. They often insinuate themselves into the child's life. They want to know about the child's hobbies, they want to know about the child's school. They give an inordinate amount of attention often to a child. And they're experts at getting the child and the family to trust them, because the caregiving adults in the family are the gatekeepers to that child. And so the pedophile knows that they need to seduce the family members into trusting them so that they can have access to the child. And so essentially, they're professional con artists. They con the family and they con the child into trusting them. And then as soon as the trust is established, that you believe that they're trustworthy, then they start taking small steps to insinuate themselves further into the child's life. So it's actually a whole series of steps that they take. And when I would have the perpetrators in the prison, when I was doing intensive group therapy with them, I would have them detail out the way that they would operate, so to speak, in getting a child's trust. And the vast majority of these perpetrators, unless their characteristics or case factors were incestuous in nature, in other words, with children in their own family, they didn't even have the opportunity to be staying in the homes the way that the ministry does. So that door is just open access for these people who are perpetrators amongst the ministry. That they even have better access than perpetrators in the general public. So after the trustworthiness has been established, often they start touching the child in ways that just seem very innocuous. I've read case factors where a perpetrator, a worker, was staying in a home and he was tickling the child in the kitchen in front of the caretaking adult who was there, and the caretaker adult just thought it was natural, normal behavior. And no, it's prepping the child, and it's grooming the child, and it's grooming the adult caretaker that your child is safe with me, and I like your child, and I'll entertain your child. So there's a lot of ways. It's kind of like water. It seeps into all the cracks and it seeps into all the areas the directions that it wants to go. And that's kind of
Yes.
how they do that.
Are there any specific red flags that should never be ignored?
Again, inordinate attention, especially by a male worker towards children. An example I can give is I teach swimming lessons and I teach water aerobics at the local YMCA. And one day we had all the children playing outside the window. We could see them from the pool. And one of the little girls had on a really cute little snow outfit because it was winter. And so another lady and me in the class, we said, oh, look at how cute that little outfit is. And we're both grandmas, and so we were kind of swooning over the cute outfit and how cute the little girl was. And the men in the group were just like, yeah, well, whatever, keep telling us the exercises to do. So the men were just like, yeah, she's cute, move on. And that's how most men are towards children. But with a perpetrator, especially a pedophile and or somebody that wants an opportunistic situation with a child, they're giving the child much more interest than men who aren't that way would. And it kind of sounds subtle, but it's something that your gut could kind of pick up on. And moms have reported that with certain people in the ministry. That my gut was saying that he's just paying too much attention to my child, or he's treating my child in an especially special manner above and beyond what the other men in her life how they would treat her. So it's often a lot of subtle cues, but it's the attention getting, it's the, let the child sit on my lap. That would be the day that any man would come into my household and sit on the couch, unless he is close family and I know him extremely well, and want my child to be sitting on his lap. So a lot of times sitting on the lap, let me be alone in the basement with the child. Here in the Midwest, a lot of our homes have basements. So wanting a lot of alone time with the child, maybe being interested in sleeping in the same bedroom as the child, those kind of things. So there's a lot of red flags, and there's a lot of information on the internet about red flags. One of the things that I provided for a handout for this was the stages predators often go through or use in order to get closer to the victim. And so that's another thing that people could read if they'd like to.
Yep, we'll be posting that as soon as this is
And you know what? If we can, we should try and clip. ABC interviewed Richard Schober. He was a former worker, got kicked out of the work for abusing children, then went on to get married to a totally unsuspecting gal from the church, sweetheart, and then just abused a whole bunch of kids. And he was convicted. Then he was eventually let back into meetings up in Alaska, and that turned into a whole debacle too. But he interviews with ABC News, and he says to them that he lost count on how many children he abused. And sometimes he was abusing children and they didn't even know they were being abused.
Yes.
And I have
very subtle.
Yep. And he did it. I know from survivors of his that he did it with other people in the room.
Yep. Oh, yes. Oh, very common. Very common.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Perpetrators or pedophiles especially are really well known for loving to be in swimming pools with kids. And maybe the back of their hand will just graze the bottom of their swimsuit in the pool. And that is a sexual assault in terms of if you're doing it on purpose and if you're getting gratification from it. The ways that these people get gratification is just exponential. And when you hold their feet to the fire and have them really be talking about it and disclosing in detail what they do, they're very crafty at it. They're very creative at it.
very interesting. We are getting close on time. Cynthia, what would you like to say that we haven't talked about? You're muted. Can you take your mute off? There you go.
Yep. I just want the workers to open the coffers and start paying out settlements to the survivors. I just want their money.
And what would
for the
that number
survivors.
look like in your opinion? What should that number be?
Well, I'd like it.
Realistically?
Well, first we got to see how much money they have. I think they have a whole bunch more than we think they have. But I think what's doable to start is $250,000 per survivor. I think that's a fair number.
Okay. And do you have any numbers on what the cost is? I know Steve will be covering this next week at Bridges and Balm, but what the cost for treatment is?
Oh, I don't think that would cover a lifetime treatment for a survivor. Do you, Denise?
That's the point I'm trying to make.
No,
Yeah.
Natalie probably would have a good handle on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, you got to remember, not only do you have therapy, you have loss of relationship, jobs. I mean, it's your whole life. It's your whole life.
And that's
There's
what
no
they
price
don't
tag.
understand.
Yeah, yeah.
250 is a drop in the bucket. I just want to
Yeah.
make that very, very
Oh,
clear.
yeah. It's a
Very
really
clear.
fair number. It's a really fair number for
Right.
these types of cases. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. No,
Uh,
it's
yeah,
bare
completely.
minimum. Yeah.
Yes. We will be, Travis, I see, and Shayna, I see that your question, the name of the guy in Alaska. Cynthia, can you post that link as soon as we're done here? That you just, the ABC.
Yeah, I'd have to find it. Yes.
Richard Kroger. Somebody just posted it. Thank you, Eileen.
Thank you.
Okay, the most prominent perpetrator in the area at that time. Okay, Denise, we are down on time. What would you like to say that we haven't talked about yet?
Okay, what I would like to say is that I have done, I hope, a fairly assertive effort in trying to get the ministry's attention in terms of leadership to do the right thing with anybody who has credible allegations and or we know is a perpetrator. So at this stage, though, what I'd really like to ask is I'd like for those who are still a part of the church to, in other words, the fellowship or the friends, I would like them to be willing to get more educated about the whole process to make more of a stand for accountability. And so there's a researcher out of Oklahoma, and she had determined that the average pedophile has 117 child victims in their lifetime. Well, that number is even a low number. There's a book out by Anna Salter, and the book has been out for quite a while, and she dedicated a good portion of her career researching these predators. And the book is called Predator, and I put it again in the handout that's provided. And for anybody who hopefully wouldn't be horribly triggered by reading that book, I would encourage everybody to read that book who's willing to, because you'll know that the average pedophile has even more than 117 victims in their lifetime usually. And so it takes a village to be accountable, to hold these people accountable. And if the leadership isn't going to do it, I would love to see the fellowship stand up and do it.
I love that. Handouts will be posted. Okay, the last thing that I wanted to just bring to the attention of everybody is that we will be doing this again. We will be having however many conversations. I know the two of you are more than happy to have as many conversations as you want. Questions can be asked, posted. Sorry, I'm trying to do two things at once. So yes, we will have this conversation again, but thank you for that. My last question for you both is, what correspondence are the overseers even willing to have with you at this point?
I speak to one overseer.
So they are completely ignoring.
Yeah. Yes, actually, yes. I just emailed Dwayne Hopkins twice last week and I get no answer. Yeah. Yeah. It's about child safety. I mean, shouldn't be hard.
Is there any kind of justification for that?
Well, not in my mind, but they obviously think they have some. So.
Okay. Well, does anybody else have any other questions? We are going to call it a day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, and we will be posting this. What's that, Denise?
I said thank you for having us.
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes?
Cynthia, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I want to just give last word then. If there's anything else that either of you want to say, I always like to give last word.
Go
Open the
for it,
conference.
Denise. Have the last word, Denise.
Well, with members of this population, meaning perpetrators, accountability is the one thing that we have the hope that would help them to stop the behavior. And that's the bottom line for this members of this population. And so we need everybody to be willing to make a stand to bring them to accountability.
It's that simple.
It is.
It's not more complicated than that.
Yep.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening, and we will look forward to having you both on again sometime soon.
Thank you.
All right.
Good night.
Good night.
Night, night.